Hey, ladies and gentlemen, what are you doing? In this video, we're going to unbox the DWS780. This is the 12-inch sliding miter saw dual bevel. It's got a lot of features on it, including the XPS cutline system. Okay, it's not as light as you think it is. Alright, so this is the base extension. Install it this way. Need a lock washer. I would also use thread lock, wing nut, finger tight. Give this a little extra tight. Okay, I'm sliding this back and forth. Let's see if there's any issues, feelings. Seems fine. Alright, so you just have to know that as you're using a saw, the further out you come from the end, that it can move on you. I just have to make sure it's locked down to verify that that's true. It's a smooth cut. There's little, I could feel a little imperfection right there. It's still not perfect, because I bet we're 45, but I don't think we're 90. And that could be because of play. But now I have to flip it back to 90 degrees and make it square. And we'll flip so that we're at 0, which we're at 0 right now. Now we're going to use our framing square to compare. Okay, there's definitely a gap there. Definitely a gap. So you can see that the shadow is casted on this. It's very 45. Okay. Alright, so right now the saw is in a locked position. We simply push down a little bit, pull this pin out, so now we can release the saw in a vertical position, and we can also slide it. So what I did was use my compound my compound square to check that I'm truly on, truly locked in 90, so we are 90 that way. And I also verified this way, but we're slightly off. So that's the next step right now, which is to loosen this and position it so it's good. So we'll lock it in place. Double check. Okay, so I will accept that. Okay, the saw blade that comes with this is the Contractor saw blade, 60 tooth. And we're going to replace this with a Diablo blade that I got. Alright, so we hit the saw is unplugged. So we have our tool that came with the saw. So there's the sliding lock, so I'll lock that in place just for safety right now. We want to move the blade guard up to expose this. And we use the Torx to turn it just enough that we can lift the blade guard off and out of the way. There we go. Okay, so yeah, you have to, obviously you gotta lift it up more. Alright, so right now the blade spins, but there's this little pin here that you push in this pin. There we go. That's the pin I'm going to push in to lock the arbor so that I can loosen it up, so that I can remove the blade. Alright, so while I'm pushing that pin in, I'm going to loosen the arbor. I'm using the Allen key, and this is reverse thread, so you have to push down in this case to loosen it. I'm wearing gloves because it's cold in here. Alright, so this is the blade that came with the saw. The blade is fine if I want to do framing, but I'm doing finish work because we're building a bed. So this is the D1280X blade. I'm a fan of this blade. So we're going to swap this blade out. Just enough to get the blade out. There we go. Get the blade out. Okay, there we go. Blade is installed. Alright, so they actually have embossed in here tighten and loosen. So it shows you the direction that you want to tighten and loosen. Okay, and that goes on one way. Alright, so tighten. Now we want to go the opposite direction. Okay, and so we'll use our arbor lock again. So I'm pushing that pin in to lock the arbor. Now I want to proceed to tighten. Now we have to put our blade guard back down. So now we're using the torque side. But if you don't have a Torx bit, you can use a flathead. Alright, so now the blade guard is reinstalled again. Yeah, buddy. So now that I played with that, let me double check. I expect it to be fine. Alright, seems fine that way. Let's check it this way. Yep, it looks good this way. Alright. Alright. So now we're going to make our first cut with this new blade. Okay, so I'm going to position the fence back. So put the fence back all the way. Do the same with this side. We'll have to bring them back out because... And now this piece is... Yeah, so a little bit more than 5.5. And now we're just going to cut this one part out. Right, so this saw can handle a capacity of 6 11/16 vertically with a depth of, which looks like it can handle 2 inches. Because see, we're cutting, it's this area right here that we're taking advantage of. But first we got to lock the saw in place. So we use this here to lock the saw. Let's loosen up this sliding arbor. Now that's locked in place. Now we'll lock the slide. So now you can see that this is how much of space we're able to cut. Okay, so now we'll wrap this board with tape. Okay, so you can see the cut on the front of the board is perfect. Still some tear out there, but if you're doing trim work, you're really not going to care because that's going to be the back part of the cut. But now we're going to cut the same board downwards. So let's Do it the same orientation that we're doing. Let's check for square. So this could use a little bit more tweaking vertically with the bevel. And it's not looking bad. Now the method that I would always use in the past is looking down through the blade guard and seeing what it looks like. Alright, so not a lot of chip out going long ways that way. So that's the difference, right? I mean, this is a really good blade. I'm really happy with this blade. And I'm going to use this as the reference, this direction this time, because this is what I'm using for the board. Okay, again, I got my line there. This time I'm going to use my sight on the blade. And I'm going to turn off this light. And now I'm just using my sight with I just want it to be right on the line. And this is the method that I would always use without the XPS. Okay, so that's using my sight, and I wanted it to split the line. Yeah, so I always want it to be right on the line. I wanted to split the line so that I could see that the line was there, to know that what I did visually was perfect. And let's inspect the back. Yeah, not bad. A little bit of chip out. Alright, so now we're going to do this again. This time we're going to use the XPS. This switch right here is what turns. So you either push it back to turn it off, push it forward to turn it on. So that's the switch I'm using to turn on the light. So now you can see the light is on. So I'm going to use this clamp, and we'll get this clamp in place. That way I can do this sort of one-handedly. And then you know when you turn it around this way, now it won't come off. So now I'm loosening the handle. Okay, got the board in place. Then when we get the board, this is the line that we're using. So I'll move the board in place to get it there right with the line. See that the lines are showing that it's just gonna miss. Alright, so the switch here, the switch has a safety feature where I can't engage the switch here unless if I flip this, then I can turn it. Okay, so you flip this, hold it in place, and then that's your switch for engaging it. So again, it's this little safety switch here, right there. Okay. So a little bit of chip out can help with some tape. So definitely cut onto the line. So now this is our problem that we have, is if I want a board that's measured exactly, you got a pencil that's not exactly sharp, using it to scribe a line instead of using like a sharp instrument to scribe the line. Alright, so let's say we want to go and we want 30 and 15/16. Okay, so there's always a lot of factors, you know. Is the tape measure perfectly square? So the way I roll that out is I bring it all the way to the edge, and that way I make sure I'm even. But then if you want to take measurements, so now look at how fat my pencil mark is. So getting something exact in woodworking is quite tough unless you're doing things with exact instruments or instruments that you can tolerate a certain level of accuracy. So now where do I choose to mark my pencil line? So my pencil's sort of fat. And we're going to cut on that line. And we're going to use the XPS to get it on that line. And then we'll take a measurement to see how it goes. And we took our measurement, since I don't know if that end is square. Yep. Okay, so that worked out. 30 7/8. Happy with that. Okay, so that's our crosscut feature. All right, let's say you want to transport the saw, so let's turn off the light. I can see me forgetting to turn that off. Okay, so the saw is unplugged. All right, so the saw is, so we remove that lock. We put the saw in the down position. All right, so we'll push this, and we'll slide this all the way to 60 degrees. Okay, we'll lock it in a position. Next, we want to use our rail lock. So we push the saw all the way back, loosen that, push the saw all the way back, and then we use our rail lock. So our rail lock is this knob right here. So we are locking this into position, and then at this point you can lift the saw up. Now it is 56 pounds, so it's not light. I can handle this saw, but it is heavy. So you have to push this down to get it to lock into these predefined places. 15, 22 and a half, 31.6, and then 45, and then we can push it down and go further to 50. Now if we don't want it to lock into place with this, we can just push it down and use this to lock that down, and now we're no longer dependent upon those predetermined stops. This happened on my other saw over time, picking it up and everything. Sometimes this plate needs to be adjusted. So once you get your saw trued and in the exact position, you loosen all these screws, and then you slide this plate into position so that it matches what you just checked on your saw to make sure it's 90 degrees or 0 degrees, I should say. And then you retighten these screws. So now I can move this saw without having to worry about it stopping in each of these positions. If I want a very specific miter angle, so let's say I want to go, and I might actually have an angle gauge that already preset based on something like, or a protractor that I have set. I'll just set it to, like, let's say 49.5 degrees. That could be where it is, and then I'll lock it into place. So now that saw is locked into place. So now I can push it back. I can release this locking lever and then get it back to 0. So now we're back to 0. So if you find that the locking mechanism isn't locking anymore, you can give that screw right there, this one right here, you can give that screw a little quarter turn, eighth of a turn at a time until you're satisfied with the amount of tension that this gives for locking in place, right? And you can see the lock stop is right there to understand the mechanics of it. So when I push down on this here, you can see that's the lock stop. That's actually engaging. So let's try that. So we'll push down and we'll turn it. So now the lock stop is riding on that metal, and then it's going to pop right there. You can see, so that's how that works. So that's the lock stop right there. So when I push down on this, we're actually moving this up so we can be free again to lock into the 0 position. I like to demystify the mechanics behind something so you can appreciate what went into it and how it works, so that if you have problems later, you'll understand that, oh, well, it's because the lock stop is loose or it's not locking and staying in place, so maybe I need to tighten that adjustment. Okay, so here's the 2. So adjusting the bevel stop to 22.5 or 33.9. All right, so we flip this right here. So this is our bevel lock knob. And now you can see that there. That's going to touch. And that's going to be 22.5. So that's the measurement right there, 22.5. And I'm not going to bother checking that it's 22.5. This is something you would have to do for your saw. But that bolt right there, this bolt right there, that's what you would adjust if you have to tweak that angle. Put that one back and you push this other one in like that. So now you have the other stop, and you can see what that stops at. So you can see that stopped right there. And now that's the one that went to 33.9 degrees. So that's 33.9, so that's where that stopped at. And now you can do the same thing to the other side, right? So you can do 22 degrees. Now we'll come back the other way. Oh, but now, if you notice, we just stopped at 0. So this is a good point to talk about this other thing. So this is the 0 reference. So, okay, there we go. So now that's released. So it no longer stops at 0. So now this will stop on 22.5, which we can see that's the 22.5 there with that marker. So we're going to flip this back. It actually stops it from going past the 0 mark. So now it's locked at 0. All right, so if we want to make use of the grooving stop, so this is the grooving stop here, but it's a combination of that too. So we're going to use our thingy here to loosen this up. And we'll set our stop, and once we're satisfied with the depth, which we're just going to play around. Okay, so that's still too low. Let me get this guy out some more. Okay, so that's how much, so this is how much it'll go down. That's how low it's going to go, right? So based on that, but now I got to lock this into place. So we're just going to turn this wing nut to create some opposing force to this that'll lock that nut into place. What we're going to do is we're going to come out here and we're going to push into the cut, because that's the way you're supposed to make the cuts. I read about that after making my mistake. Like this far. That's how many cuts we're going to do. It's going to create a lot of sawdust. Alright, so the first one, let's turn our light on. So we're going to take off that much material there. And this XPS is actually really helping out a lot, because I can see exactly where the blade, the kerf is. So I can know if I'm going too far past the line or not. So I believe we need to put a sacrificial piece of wood in there. Not a lot, just enough to bring us out to about here. And I do have such a piece right here. Okay, so put that right there. And we'll do this again. This board into place so it doesn't move. Alright, so this isn't square because I just noticed that this was sticking out over and pushing the board out a little bit. So, I mean, if I want to get exact, I can pull this in and I'll do it again. Alright, so there you go. Now we have a rabbit in this board. And we can check that it's square now. Yep, so it's square. And then we can check it this way and see how well. I mean, you can look and see, you know, we were up a little bit high, but you can clean this up with a chisel, which you may want to do anyway. But if this is for construction, framing, this is good enough. If this is for woodworking, you may want to use your table saw instead. But yeah, okay, so that's for doing dados and rabbits. So when you no longer want to use the grooving stop, you just flip that up, and then there's literally nothing for it to stop on, and the saw goes all the way down. And again, let me show you why we had to put this board there. You see with the grooving stop, when we had it set, so let's set the grooving stop again. So the grooving stop is set. You can see there that it's not going to cut perfectly, right? Because you got part of the curvature of the saw blade there. So you have to find a halfway point of the blade right where the arbor is. And that's the spot that you want to come out. So that's why we added this extra piece of board, so that as we push through this board, it meets it flat, right? So that's about there at that point. But we got a little bit more to go. And it all depends upon the grooving depth. The higher up you go with the grooving depth, the less of a flat surface you're going to be able to cut. Now, if I were going halfway through this board, it probably would have been fine, because the halfway point, this is 1.5 inches, halfway point would have been 3/4 of an inch, right? So it would have been fine. So the capacity for cutting a board, okay, so where we come to, it says it can cut 13.5 inches. I agree with that. At a thickness of 4.5. So that's exactly what they said. 13.5 inches by 4.5 inches is how deep and how thick of a cut we can make. And then being able to cut this, right? So you lock this into place. So now that's locked into place. Now let's cut this part off here. So let's bring our fence in. Okay, bring our fence all the way in there for extra support. Now we'll just cut off. So this is a 2x6. So it's actually a little bit more than 5.5 inches long. And we're just going to cut off this part right here. So now the distance, so we want to lock this into place now. So now we can see what our distance is from that there. Now we're going to cover replacing this the belt. We're not going to replace the belt. I just want to show you the location of the belt. Too big. All right. One more screw in here. Oops. So we got all 3 screws. All right, so this is where your belt gets replaced. So there's these screws here that you would loosen up, and you can use a T25 to loosen these 4 screws, maybe 5 screws, and slide the motor forward and replace the belt, and then slide it back into position. But you want to make sure you get the proper tension on the belt. And I don't know how to gauge the proper tension. But, okay, so now we're going to put this back. So that's what it looks like on the inside there. And this is our depth that we saw there for the groove stop. Had quite a bit of force on here, so I'm torquing it down, trying to remember the force that I needed to apply it. Okay. Oh yeah, there is this 45 stop, so I want to show you this real quick. So if we push this up, we can exceed 45 degrees. All right, so right now we're at 45 degrees. And we're at 45 degrees because there's this thing in the way that is blocking it. So that's preventing it from reaching 45, or going past 45. So now we'll tilt it back some, and now I'm going to flip this out of the way like that. All right, so now we can exceed that, and you can see here that we're exceeding 45 degrees. Right, so 45 degrees right there. Okay, we'll push this back. Okay, so now that it's pushed back, now we'll stop at 45. So now it's stopped at 45. But now I'm going to check it to make sure it is truly 45 degrees. Square. I just want to check that it's truly 45. So relative to the board, it's 45. All right, here's a moment of truth. I forgot that we gotta unlock this so we can slide it. This guy here. So now we can push down again. It doesn't look perfect. Okay, and then the next thing we want to check is that it's square. And we want to do it relative to this end here. Okay, it is not square. Okay, so let's see here. I'm gonna try it. The saw moved, the whole saw base moved on me. And that's why we need to lock it down. Okay, now I can clamp it this way maybe. Okay, so now we're clamped down. Let's see what this looks like. All right, we're going to try it again. Okay, take our clamp off. Okay, now we'll check for square. Yeah, it's still off. But are we 45 still? Okay, we look 45. That's good. All right. So now let's see what it looks like when we put it on the bed. Well, there you go. All right, so that's how that's going to work. Okay, it says the outside measurement is 57 inches.